Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. In October, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, announced she would be resigning her position at the United Nations at the end of the year. Yesterday, Ambassador Haley spoke with Sean about her time at the UN, her working relationship with President Trump, and much, much more. Take a look.
All right, joining us now is U.S. Ambassador to the UN, former Governor Nikki Haley is with us. Ambassador, good to see you. Congratulations. You know, I look over the last 2 years, a little less than 2 years, and what do I see? We saw what's happened in North Korea. Jerusalem is now the capital of Israel. It's now been moved to its proper home. We've watched ISIS being shut down. The Iranian sanctions have been put in place and seem effective. American strength abroad, I would argue, has never been stronger, but you have the front row seat. So am I right in my perceptions?
I mean, America has found her voice back again. It is a good time for America in the world. Now, for some countries, that's a good thing, and for some countries, that's a bad thing. For Americans, that's a great thing, because I think what we've basically seen is that it was time for us to start talking about what we believed in and what we didn't. When I came in, they had just had a Cuban-sponsored resolution that was anti-American, that basically blamed America for everything. And the United States abstained on that vote. I came in after they did the anti-Israel bias, and instead of standing up for our friends in Israel, we again abstained on our vote. This is a new day and a new time where we don't abstain. You know exactly where the United States stands. You know what we're for, you know what we're against, and you know where we're going. And so I think there's a lot of moral clarity for the United States now, and I think countries appreciate that we're now very straightforward.
I've watched an interview, and you talk about your relationship with the president. It sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, like it was a good cop, bad cop routine. Like you would use whatever the issue was, you would use his strength, that he would go out and be combative. It seems like the world leaders believe him when he says something, and that you would use that in your negotiations. Explain how the dynamic worked.
Well, I think the only thing is I didn't make him out to be the bad cop. What I said was, this is where the president is. Unless we get this done, I can't promise you where he's going to go, because he's upset and we need to move forward. The president and I have a great relationship. It was a great partnership. We respected each other. I let him be him. I turned around and just used his unpredictability as an advantage, because it is. For many who say people don't know what to expect from the United States, that's not a bad thing. And so I use that as leverage. I use that as ways of getting us what we needed. And he was always great in making sure that he never let anybody get comfortable. And so I always saw it as a great working relationship.
Did you come to find that, though, as maybe good cop, bad cop was a bad phrase. Maybe the way to say it, though, is he likes to keep everybody on his toes, and he knows exactly what he's doing. That's what I have discovered. Do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely, absolutely, in every way whatsoever. I mean, you know, his strong point really is communicating to leaders around the world. And I would always tell the president, and strongly believe, if you get him in front of any world leader, he wins them. He completely wins them. And if any world leader threatens the United States, he puts the absolute fear of God into them. And, you know, for me, it is the reason our foreign policy is so strong. It's the reason why we have been so effective, is because the president has said very clearly what he will do, what he won't do. But most importantly, he stood by it. When he said if they used chemical weapons, there would be price to pay, and then he followed through with it. That said a lot to the international community, that you can't take this president for granted.
What's funny to me is, if NATO doesn't believe that we might pull back on some of our, we pay, what, 72 cents of every dollar, right, and the president is challenging them to pay more. If Mexico, Canada, China, and our European allies, if they don't believe the president is really going to, there's really going to be consequences as it relates to trade deals, they'll never negotiate. So I think there's a force and a wisdom, sort of like the art of the deal. And I know everybody gets panicked. Like, I think there was a lot of panic over Little Rocket Man, my button's bigger than yours, and, you know, fire and fury. But look at where we now have an opportunity of having the entire Korean Peninsula nuclear free.
Well, and you know, I'll tell you, first of all, look at NATO. Now all the countries are paying more, so what he did worked. When you look at North Korea, it was that rhetoric combined with General McMaster at the NSC at the time, calling different countries, telling them to expel diplomats, not to allow them to have embassies. And then all of that work allowed for us to get those sanctions done at the United Nations. And so I will tell you, while people didn't like what he was saying or how he was saying it, what it allowed me to do is say, he's being honest, he's very truthful. We need to pass these sanctions, or I can promise you, if there is a threat, he will respond.
I agree with you about the Saudi Arabia situation, and I find that people have been far too simplistic in their analysis of it. It's far more complicated than that. And I believe he's responsible. In my heart, I think the evidence will show eventually, if it has not already. I obviously don't have access to that kind of intelligence. But there's also other things, and we've got to look contextually through history. We had to align with Stalin in World War II to defeat Hitler, a mass murderer, but we did. I look at the emerging alliance of the United States, Israel, the Saudis, Jordanians, Egyptians, Emirates against Iranian hegemony as maybe a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to thread a needle. It is frustrating that they did this. I've been probably the loudest critic against Saudi Arabia for years. Treatment of women, gays and lesbians, persecution of Christian and Jews. I don't know the answer, but I think it's far more complicated, especially believing that they did this to Khashoggi. What are your thoughts?
It's a very complicated situation, but it is one that can be handled and can be solved. First of all, if you have Saudi officials going into a Saudi consulate, the Saudi government is responsible, which makes MBS responsible, period. That's just what we know. Secondly, our United States principles, values will not allow us to give them a pass, and we shouldn't. And I think that the president made a good first step when he sanctioned the 17 individuals. I think we need to continue to have harsh conversations with the Saudis about how this doesn't fit the means of international norms. It's not accepted by the United States, and we can't continue to partner with someone that continues to brutalize people in this way. And I think we have to decide what accountability is going to look like for them. But at the same time, when we talk about the Houthis in Yemen, when we talk about Hezbollah in Lebanon, when we talk about Iran and their role in Syria, we cannot look at Saudi Arabia and not see that they've been such a good partner with us on that. And so there are two different avenues we need to take, and both can be done. Absolutely. Yeah. And so, this is a fine line we have to walk. We just have to do both. They have to know where they stand on where we stand on what they did, but we also have to be able to go and say, okay, how are we going to continue to push Iran back from all of this terrorist activity?